fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
I stared at the rejection letter, the elegant, almost artistic script of the devil's signature mocking me from the bottom of the page. It wasn't merely a signature, it was a brand, a mark of corporate cruelty sanctioned by an unseen hand, another claim unjustly denied. Another family shattered by an already unbearable tragedy, now left utterly destitute because some infernal, heartless bureaucrat, or perhaps a particularly charming devil, had decided their suffering wasn't covered under policy terms. The words felt like a physical blow, reverberating with the despair of those I had failed. The harsh, unrelenting fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on my desk, a sterile backdrop to the human suffering I processed daily. I gathered the damning papers, my fingers trembling not just from the cold of the air conditioning, but with a barely contained fury that threatened to erupt. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was my third outrageously denied claim this week, each one a fresh wound on my conscience. How many more excuses could I fabricate for the grieving families who had entrusted their futures, their very lives, to a company that now seemed to relish in their betrayal? The weight of their trust and my inability to uphold it pressed down on me, heavy as a shroud. "Ms. Hartwell," my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling me from the abyss of my thoughts. "Mr. Black is here for his 9 o'clock. Of course he was. The timing felt almost deliberate, a cruel joke. Damian Black, the devil who ran our entire insurance division with an iron fist, his decrees absolute, and a smile that could charm the scales off a dragon, or coax a pauper into giving up their last coin." I straightened my blazer, my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to calm its frantic beat. This wasn't just another routine meeting with upper management. This was the moment I'd been meticulously preparing for all month, the moment I would finally confront him about the ruthless, unethical practices that were systematically destroying lives under his command. I opened my office door and nearly walked directly into a solid wall of expensive cologne and tailored perfection. Damien stood there, an imposing presence. His obsidian eyes gleamed with a predatory amusement as he towered over my 5'4" frame. Every inch of him radiated an ancient, undeniable power, from the way his dark suit custom-fitted and hugged his muscular frame to the predatory grace with which he moved, like a big cat surveying its domain. "Ms. Hartwell," he purred, his voice a low, resonant baritone like aged whiskey mixed with sin, "punctual as always. I like that in an employee, a rare trait in these parts." A subtle jab at the lax attitudes of my colleagues, perhaps, or merely a veiled compliment meant to disarm. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze head-on, refusing to be intimidated by his aura or his carefully constructed charm. "Mr. Black, I believe we have matters of considerable importance to discuss." My voice, thankfully, came out steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. His smile widened, a slow, deliberate unveiling that revealed teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp, a touch too pointed for a human. "Oh, I'm counting on it." The words were a challenge, an invitation to a game I knew he intended to win. He gestured for me to precede him into my office, a polite but firm command. I felt his gaze burning into my back as I walked past, a palpable heat that prickled my skin. The door clicked shut behind us, a sound that felt alarmingly final, sealing us within the confines of my small space. I turned to face him, determination steeling my spine, pushing aside the fear that still lingered. "You're denying claims that should unequivocally be paid," I stated, foregoing any preamble. My voice was sharp, cutting through the tense silence. "Families are suffering, Ms. Hartwell, because of your callous, cost-cutting policies. People are dying." The directness of my accusation hung heavy in the air. Damien settled into the chair across from my desk, crossing his long legs with deliberate slowness, an act designed to project nonchalance or perhaps pure arrogance. "I'm running a business, Ms. Hartwell, a very large, very complex business. We can't possibly pay out on every single claim that crosses our desk. It would bankrupt the company within months. You understand basic economics, I presume." He spoke with an infuriating calmness, as if discussing the weather. "Bullshit," I snapped, my composure finally cracking. "These are legitimate claims. I've reviewed every single one of them myself, cross-referencing policy terms, medical reports, every piece of documentation. People are literally dying because they can't afford necessary treatment, all because you've twisted language and found nefarious loopholes to avoid paying what is owed." My fist clenched on my desk, my voice rising in a crescendo of indignation. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his posture suddenly intense. I caught the glint of something ancient and dangerous in his obsidian eyes, a flicker that went beyond mere corporate ruthlessness. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Miss Hartwell. You see only the surface, the individual trees, not the entire, intricate forest." "I know enough to recognize cruelty when I see it," I shot back, refusing to back down, "and I won't be a part of it anymore, not for one more day, not for one more dollar." My declaration was a line in the sand, a point of no return. For a long moment he said nothing, simply studying me with an unreadable intensity. Then he stood, moving with liquid grace to close the distance between us. I refused to back away, even when he invaded my personal space, his imposing height making me feel small and utterly vulnerable. The air crackled with a strange, charged energy, the scent of his expensive cologne suddenly overwhelming. "You're passionate," he murmured, his breath warm against my cheek, sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. "I admire that, Miss Hartwell, truly, but passion without understanding is dangerous. It can lead to ruin for you and for others." His words were a warning, a subtle threat wrapped in a velvet glove. "I understand perfectly," I said, though my voice wavered slightly, betraying the tremor that had begun deep inside me. "And I'm going to the board with this. I have undeniable evidence of fraud, of deliberate claim denials that violate every ethical guideline our company purports to uphold. I have everything they need to tear you down." His laughter was deep and rich, a sound that sent unexpected, unsettling shivers down my spine, echoing in the quiet office. "You think the board doesn't know, Miss Hartwell, my dear, naive Miss Hartwell. They're the ones who specifically hired me to maximize profits, to prune the dead weight, regardless of the human cost. They approved every single one of those unethical practices you so passionately decry." He straightened, his gaze piercing, leaving me momentarily breathless. I stepped back, my mind reeling, struggling to process the implications of his words. "That can't be true," I whispered, the conviction in my voice faltering. "Oh, but it is." His expression turned serious, a rare glimpse beneath his polished facade. "The world isn't as black and white as you'd like to believe, Miss Hartwell. Sometimes difficult, painful decisions have to be made for what is perceived as the greater good, even if that good is only for a select few at the top. There's nothing good about letting people die for profit," I whispered, my voice thick with despair, the idealism that had fueled me beginning to crack. He reached out, his long fingers hovering just above my cheek, a gesture that was both tender and unsettling. "You're an idealist," he murmured, his voice dropping to a whisper. "A genuine, unblemished idealist. I find that refreshing in this den of vipers." His fingers finally brushed my skin, a feather-light touch that sparked an electric current through me, but also dangerously naive. The air between us crackled with a tension that was more than just adversarial, something electric and undeniably potent. I should have slapped his hand away, should have maintained my professional distance, erected every barrier I possessed, but I found myself inexplicably frozen, caught in the intensity of his gaze, the unexpected warmth of his touch. "You're wrong," I breathed, my voice barely audible, struggling to regain some semblance of control. "And I'll prove it. I'll prove you and the board are wrong, and I will win." His smile returned, but it was no longer charming. It was purely predatory, a flash of something ancient and hungry. "I'm looking forward to seeing you try, Miss Hartwell. It will be quite the spectacle." 3 days later, I stood outside the boardroom, my evidence clutched in shaking hands. I'd spent every waking hour meticulously compiling everything: emails, internal memos, documented cases of wrongful denial, sworn affidavits from desperate families. This was my chance, the culmination of weeks of sleepless nights and burning conviction. This was my chance to expose the truth, force real change, and perhaps finally find some measure of peace for my tormented conscience. My heart pounded with a mixture of terror and fierce resolve. The door opened and I marched inside, my head held high, ready to face down the entire board of directors, to unleash the torrent of evidence I had gathered. But the scene that greeted me made my blood run cold, chilling me to the bone. It was a trap perfectly sprung. Every member of the board was present, their faces impassive, their eyes like stone. Damien was there too, rising from his chair with an unnervingly casual air, but they weren't alone. Surrounding them were figures I recognized from company files, other high-level executives, department heads, the very people I'd planned to rally to my cause, to inspire with my fight for justice. They sat like a jury, and they were all looking at me with expressions ranging from pity to thinly veiled contempt to outright disdain. My allies were gone, or worse, they had never existed. "Ms. Hartwell," Damien said smoothly, his voice devoid of any warmth, cutting through the chilling silence, So good of you to join us. We've been expecting you, actually. I felt the trap closing around me, the walls of the corporate labyrinth tightening, but I refused to cower. I lifted my chin, my voice unwavering despite the terror gripping me. I know what you've been doing. I have proof, irrefutable proof of your systematic corruption. Proof of what precisely, Ms. Hartwell? Asked the CFO, a silver-haired dragon in human form, his voice dripping with condescension. That we're running a remarkably successful business, that we're consistently meeting our quarterly targets and exceeding shareholder expectations. These are achievements, not crimes. Proof of fraud, I insisted, my voice ringing with righteous indignation. Of deliberate claim denials that violate our ethical obligations to policyholders, that break the very trust our company is built upon. I gestured to the thick binder in my hand, my evidence. Damien moved to stand beside me, his presence both threatening and, to my confusion, strangely comforting in its proximity. Ms. Hartwell has been under a great deal of stress lately, he said smoothly, his voice carrying an undertone of feigned concern. I'm afraid her judgment may be impaired. Perhaps a leave of absence is in order. I'm not crazy, I said through gritted teeth, my gaze sweeping across the faces of the board members, searching for a single sign of humanity, a flicker of doubt. There was none. And I'm not backing down. This isn't over. The room fell silent, the tension palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Damien's hand closed around my wrist, his grip firm but not painful, a silent, undeniable assertion of control. Come with me, Ms. Hartwell, we need to discuss this privately. His voice was low, for my ears only, a command that offered no room for refusal. I tried to pull away, but his strength was overwhelming, effortless. He led me out of the boardroom and down the quiet hall to a small, unassuming conference room, where he finally released me and gestured for me to sit. The small table and chairs felt suddenly intimate, starkly contrasting the grandeur of the boardroom. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice trembling, raw with a mix of fear and defiance. Fire me, have me committed to a psychiatric ward, as you so subtly implied. I braced myself for the worst. He leaned against the edge of the table, studying me with those intense, unblinking eyes, his expression unreadable. I could do any of those things, Miss Hartwell, and it would be perfectly within my power, but I won't, not yet at least. Why not? I demanded, suspicion warring with a nascent flicker of hope. Because you're right, the admission seemed to cost him something, a subtle shift in his posture, a flicker of genuine pain crossing his handsome features, momentarily stripping away his mask of detached power. The denials are wrong, the suffering is real and often needless, and I hate every minute of it. The words hung in the air, a stark, unexpected confession that shattered my preconceived notions of him. I stared at him, completely thrown by this revelation. My mind struggled to reconcile the devil I thought I knew with this unexpected vulnerability. Then why continue? Why be the architect of such misery if you despise it? My voice was barely a whisper, filled with a desperate need for understanding. And a hand through his dark hair, a rare, unguarded gesture of frustration that made him seem suddenly, surprisingly human. Because I don't have a choice, Ms. Hartwell, my contract binds me. It is explicit: maximize profits, ensure the continued prosperity of the board and their shareholders, and the board has made their expectations abundantly clear time and time again. If I don't do it, someone else will, and I promise you they might be even worse, more ruthless, less conflicted. At least I have some semblance of a line. He looked away, his gaze distant, lost in a private hell. That's a coward's excuse, I said softly, the words escaping before I could censor them, a harsh judgment that might cost me dearly. He met my gaze again, his eyes filled with a weary resignation. It's the reality of our world, Miss Hartwell, a reality you're only just beginning to truly glimpse. Dragons run corporations, devils handle the dirty work, ensuring the machine keeps turning, and humans like you and me are merely caught in the middle, crushed by the gears if we're not careful. He pushed off the table, moving to stand before the window, looking out at the city below, a concrete jungle mirroring their corporate one. I thought of all the families I'd had to lie to, all the claims I'd processed knowing deep down they were wrongful denials, contributing to the very system I abhorred. The weight of it was suffocating. I can't do this anymore, I whispered, the words heavy with despair, a surrender of sorts. Neither can I, he said, turning back to face me, his voice equally quiet, laden with a shared burden. But we're trapped, both of us, bound by unseen chains, forced to play roles we despise. For a long, heavy moment we sat in silence, the unspoken understanding between us growing. Then I stood, gathering what remained of my resolve, a new, desperate plan forming in my mind. I'm going to the authorities. I'm going to blow this wide open, contract or no contract. I'll take them all down if I have to, myself included. This was no longer just about justice, it was about redemption. He caught my arm as I turned to leave, his grip surprisingly gentle but firm. You can't win this fight alone, Miss Hartwell, not this one. They'll destroy you, dismantle your life piece by piece, and bury you so deep no one will ever find you. His eyes held a rare intensity, a genuine concern that shook me. Maybe, I said, my voice shaking slightly, but my resolve hardening. But I have to try. I have to know I tried, no matter the cost. His grip tightened further, and I felt the heat of his touch through the fabric of my sleeve, an unexpected warmth that spread through me. There's another option, he said quietly, his voice low and urgent. You could work with me, help me find a way to change things from the inside. A slower, more strategic war, but one we might actually win. The offer hung between us, precarious and dangerous. I searched his face, looking for any trace of deception, any hint of a trick. Instead, I found only profound exhaustion, a weariness that went bone deep in something else, something that might have been hope, a desperate, fragile spark. Why would you help me? I asked, my voice filled with suspicion. Why would you risk everything you've built, everything you are for me? Because watching you fight alone is killing me, he said, the admission raw, surprising in its vulnerability. His eyes met mine, holding my gaze with an intensity that stole my breath. Because maybe, just maybe, together we can find a way out of this nightmare, a way to truly make a difference beyond just surviving. His sincerity, or what felt like sincerity, was disarming. I thought of the families, the endless suffering, the insidious corruption that had poisoned everything I'd once believed about our company, about justice. And I thought of this enigmatic devil offering me an alliance I knew, deep down, I couldn't fully trust, yet also couldn't bring myself to refuse. The alternative was to face Goliath alone, and I knew the outcome of that story. Okay, I said finally, the single word a momentous decision. I'll help you, I'll try, but I need to know we're doing this for the right reasons, Damien, for truly good reasons, not just some twisted version of them. His name felt foreign on my lips, a forbidden fruit. His smile was tentative but unmistakably genuine, a softer, less predatory curve of his lips. We'll find our reasons together, Miss Hartwell, and we'll make them count. We spent the next 2 weeks working side by side, a strange, uneasy partnership that slowly began to forge into something stronger. We delved deep into files, built meticulous cases against the most egregious policies, and painstakingly identified allies among the staff, disgruntled employees, idealistic newcomers, and quiet veterans who were also disgusted by the corruption but too afraid to act. Damien proved to be brilliant and utterly ruthless when necessary, navigating the corporate maze with a cunning I could only admire, but also surprisingly principled when it came to protecting the innocent, shielding those we sought to help. He had an uncanny ability to anticipate the board's moves, to find cracks in their armor where I saw only impenetrable steel. And somewhere in those long nights of clandestine planning and strategic plotting, something profound shifted between us. The tension that had always crackled in the air when we were together, once purely adversarial, transformed. It became something far more complex, more dangerous, tinged with an intoxicating undercurrent of unspoken desire. One night we were working particularly late in his expansive, luxurious office, surrounded by stacks of case files and damning evidence. I was utterly exhausted, my mind spinning with the immense weight of what we were trying to accomplish, the sheer audacity of our mission. Damien had been quiet for a long time, his attention focused with laser-like intensity on his laptop, his brow furrowed in thought. You should rest, he said without looking up, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. You're no good to this cause if you burn yourself out, Miss Hartwell. We need you sharp. His concern felt surprisingly genuine. I'm fine, I lied, rubbing my aching temples, the exhaustion a dull throb behind my eyes. Just a few more details to confirm. He finally glanced up, his obsidian eyes meeting mine, and something in my haggard expression seemed to make him stand and cross the opulent office to where I sat, hunched over a document. You're not fine, he said softly, his voice closer now, laced with a tenderness that sent an unexpected warmth through me. You're pushing yourself too hard. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, and you're already halfway to collapse. Before I could protest, before I could even formulate a denial, he was kneeling beside my chair, his large hands gentle as he began to work at the stubborn knots in my shoulders. His touch was firm, yet incredibly soothing, coaxing the tension from muscles I hadn't realized were so painfully tight. I should have pulled away, should have maintained our professional distance, should have reminded myself of the precariousness of our alliance. But his touch felt too good, too necessary, a balm to my weary body and soul. A soft sigh escaped my lips, involuntary and telling. Damien, I breathed, his name on my lips, a soft exhalation, and the sound of it seemed to break something in him, a final barrier falling away. His hands moved from my shoulders, traveling upwards to cup my face, his thumbs brushing over my cheekbones with impossible tenderness. His eyes, usually so guarded, were suddenly open, vulnerable, reflecting a raw emotion I hadn't dared to imagine. I never meant for this to happen, he whispered, his voice rough with an unspoken confession. I never meant to care, not about you, not like this. Care about what? I asked, my voice barely audible, though deep down, I was afraid of the answer, afraid of the truth that was hovering between us. About you, he said simply, his gaze unwavering, piercing through all my defenses. About whether you're safe, whether you're happy, about whether I'm strong enough to protect you from the inevitable consequences of what we're doing, what I'm doing by involving you. The confession hung between us, heavy with implication, vibrating with an intensity that took my breath away. I'd been so fiercely focused on the fight, on the cause, on justice, that I hadn't allowed myself to consider what was so dangerously, thrillingly growing between us. I'm not asking you to protect me, I said, though my heart was now racing, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I can take care of myself, I always have. No, you can, he murmured, his thumb brushing my bottom lip, his gaze dropping to my mouth. But I want to take care of you anyway, Miss Hartwell, I want to try. And then he was kissing me, his lips soft at first, then urgent, possessive, claiming. And I was kissing him back with a desperate hunger that matched his own. The world narrowed, collapsing around us, reduced to the taste of him, the heat of his skin, the way his hands moved over me with a desperate reverence, pulling me closer still. We stumbled from the chair, a tangled mess of limbs and desires, falling onto the plush leather couch. Clothes were shed, inhibitions discarded, until we were skin to skin, hearts racing against each other, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the storm within. His touch was fire, igniting every nerve ending, every dormant desire. His scent, a mix of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine, filled my senses, drowning out all coherent thought. He entered me slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving mine, a silent question, a shared affirmation. And in that intimate connection I felt something shift deep inside me, a final barrier falling away, a profound truth I'd been denying finally acknowledged. This wasn't just physical. This was something deeper, something that terrified me with its intensity, with its power to redefine everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, about devils. I've got you, he whispered, his voice rough with raw emotion as we moved together, an ancient dance of two souls finally finding their rhythm. I've got you, my fierce little advocate. And in that moment, tangled in his arms, connected in every possible way, I believed him. I believed that maybe, just maybe, we could win this impossible fight, that maybe we could truly change things, build something real and lasting, despite everything working against us, despite the very nature of who he was. But then my phone rang, a jarring, insistent buzz that tore through the fragile bubble of our intimacy, and the world came crashing back with brutal force. I fumbled for it, my heart sinking into my stomach when I saw the caller ID. It was my sister. I already knew, with a sickening certainty, what she was going to say. It's my sister, I said, my voice choked with sudden dread, the afterglow of our passion dissolving into icy fear. My nephew is in the hospital again. They're saying his treatment isn't covered. Again. The words were a bitter echo of the very battles we were fighting. Damien went still beneath me, his eyes snapping open, instantly alert, the tenderness replaced by a grim determination. The claim we denied last week, the experimental treatment we said was too risky, too expensive. His voice was tight, a mask of control slipping. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes, blurring my vision. I processed the paperwork myself, Damien. I signed off on it, following your directives, knowing it was wrong. I dismissed it. The self-recrimination was a bitter taste in my mouth, a fresh wound. He pulled me close, his arms strong and protective around me, as if he could shield me from the harsh truth. We'll fix this, he promised, his voice low, filled with a renewed resolve. We'll find a way, no matter what it takes. He will get his treatment. But even as he spoke, I could hear the doubt in his voice, could feel the immense weight of all the other families we couldn't help, all the individual lives being destroyed every day, bearing down on us both. We'd been so focused on the grand strategy, on the systemic corruption, on changing the big picture, that we'd momentarily forgotten about the devastating, immediate impact on individual lives. We have to do something now, I said, pulling away from him, the idealism that had driven me for so long curdling into something harder, something more fiercely pragmatic. We can't wait for our long-term plan to work. We have to help them, Damien. Help him today. In war, there were always casualties. The question was whether we were willing to pay the price and for whom. He nodded grimly, his features set, instantly back to his calculating, formidable self. I'll make some calls, leverage every contact, twist every arm, see what can be done immediately. Consequences be damned. He was already reaching for his phone, his mind clearly racing with possibilities. As I dressed, my movements urgent and purposeful, I felt the idealism that had once been my driving force solidify into something sharper, something more realistic, tempered by the harsh realities of our fight. We were fighting a war against a system designed to grind people like us into dust, to make us complicit. And I knew then that whatever happened, whatever battles lay ahead, I wouldn't be facing them alone. When I turned back to him, he was already on the phone, his expression determined, his voice a low, authoritative rumble. I don't care about the cost, he was saying, his words echoing with a fierce, uncompromising resolve. Just make it happen now, consider it a personal investment in future profitability. A subtle lie, a necessary manipulation for a cause that was now deeply personal to both of us. Because somewhere between the late-night strategy sessions and the stolen kisses, between the shared moments of frustration and the quiet victories, I'd fallen for the devil who was desperately trying to be good. And he in turn had fallen for the human who stubbornly refused to accept that some things were simply impossible or that some battles were unwinnable. Together, bound by a pact made of desperation and burgeoning love, we would either burn the world down or against all odds save it. And I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, those weren't such different outcomes after all.